Have you ever looked back at a period in your life and, realized that's when everything fundamentally shifted? When you started becoming the you are today, or maybe you're living through it right now, navigating a dizzying array of changes, or perhaps you're watching someone you love trying to figure it all out. It's a time of profound, sometimes bewildering, but ultimately transformative growth. Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is the show where we take, a stack of your sources' articles, research our own notes, and we pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge or insight. Our mission is really to be your shortcut to being well-informed, hopefully with some surprising facts and just enough humor to keep you hooked. Today, we're diving into a topic that truly touches everyone, whether you've been through it or going through it right now, or maybe you're raising someone who is, adolescence. Our main source material for this deep dive is a really comprehensive document. It's titled Adolescence Transition to Adulthood. And it's a fantastic foundation, really. It covers the physical, the emotional, social, and cognitive shifts that define this crucial period in human development. So, our objective for you today is to unpack the recognized patterns of change, things like behavior and sexuality. We want to understand the often complex underlying mechanisms driving these shifts and explore the intricate psychological landscape of the teenage years. We'll look at it all, really, from the awkward growth spurts to the intense emotional roller coasters and that powerful search for identity. Okay, let's unpack this fascinating journey from child to adult.
Yeah, and I think it's crucial right from the start to understand how the source emphasizes adolescence as a process. It's not like a fixed singular event. It clearly articulates it as a gradual journey, a journey through which a child progressively develops into an adult. And this typically begins roughly between the ages of 9 and 12 years. And it extends all the way through until about 18 or 19. So, this isn't a light switch being flipped. It's a profound multi-year evolution.
So what exactly is adolescence then? It sounds like it's really more than just sticking some age numbers on it, because the source also makes a point of saying it happens at different speeds in different people. How do we square that gradual process with all the individual variations?
That's a great question. And it's a key insight from the document, I think. While it is undeniably a gradual process, it's always marked by these profound recognizable patterns of change that unfold. You could think of it not as a single uniform timeline for absolutely everyone, but more as a universal journey, but with individual pacing.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, like everyone runs the race, but maybe at their own speed. Exactly. For instance, while every adolescent will experience a growth spurt, the timing and the intensity of that spurt will vary significantly from person to person.
Yeah.
But even with these individual variations, the patterns of development across the physical, emotional, and social domains are actually quite distinct and predictable.
Yeah.
So, like everyone's running the same race, but some might start a little earlier, some might have a faster middle leg, and, some might finish strong later on.
Right. And when we talk about these profound changes, the source really breaks them down neatly into 5 main categories. Feels very comprehensive, really covering the whole person. We're looking at physical changes first. Things like appearance of pubic hair, armpit hair, changes in voice, shifts in overall body shape.
Mm-hmm.
Then there are physiological shifts, which refers to the internal biological functions, right? Like menstruation in girls, nocturnal emissions or wet dreams in boys, and the production of sperm and ova.
That's right. The internal machinery starting up.
And then add to that the highly visible emotional changes. These are often what people immediately think of when they hear teenagers, aren't they?
Absolutely. The moods.
Yeah, like unpredictable, swinging moods and a noticeable shift towards maybe less dependence on family. Then we have sexual changes, where genuine sexual arousal and attraction start to emerge. And finally, distinct behavioral changes. Things like the formation of new, often intense peer groups, a strong drive for independence, and sometimes even, unfortunately, habit formation like experimentation with smoking or alcohol. Wow, that's quite a list. It truly covers the whole person, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, like you said, it highlights how truly holistic and interconnected this whole transformation is.
Yeah.
It's not just one aspect of development operating in isolation. No, it's a complex interplay of all these elements. For example, a physical change like a sudden growth spurt might lead to temporary awkwardness.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Which then contributes to a feeling of self-consciousness or emotional unease, potentially impacting their social interactions and, their peer group dynamics. It's really a dynamic system where one change can ripple through the entire self, affecting every other area. Understanding this interconnectedness really helps us appreciate the full scope of what an adolescent is experiencing.
That makes perfect sense. That something so complex wouldn't just happen all at once or, uniformly for everyone. The source even categorizes adolescence into 3 distinct stages, which helps give us a bit of a framework, I suppose, to understand this progression.
Yes, exactly. The document outlines early adolescence, which is roughly from 9 to 12 years old. This is typically when the first signs of puberty begin to appear.
Okay.
Then we move into middle adolescence. That spans from about 13 to 16 years. This period is often characterized by more rapid physical changes, intensified emotional shifts, and a stronger pull towards peer relationships.
Right, that middle stage feels key.
It is. And finally, there's late adolescence, covering 17 to 19 years. This is where the individual is typically becoming more independent, developing a clearer sense of identity and, well, preparing for adulthood.
It's interesting, though, how the timeline isn't uniform even within these stages. The source explicitly mentions variations occurring in timing between males and females, and also based on individual rates of development. You mentioned girls often kick off this journey a bit earlier. The source says onset can be as early as 9 years.
That's right.
Whereas for males, it typically begins between 10 and 15 years and maybe concludes between 15 and 17. So girls can be well into puberty while some boys their age are just starting out.
That's a critical observation, yeah. And it raises an important question, doesn't it? How do these variations in developmental timetables impact the individual experience? And maybe what societal implications might arise from them?
Good point. Like what?
Well, consider a scenario where a girl experiences menarche, her first menstrual period at age 10. Suddenly, she's navigating significant physical and emotional changes that maybe her peers, who might still be playing with dolls, haven't even begun to contemplate.
Right. That could feel really isolating.
It can. It can lead to feelings of being different, self-consciousness, or even social pressures that are just out of sync with her chronological age group. And similarly, a boy whose voice changes much later than his friends might feel self-conscious or, less manly compared to his peers. These differences in timing can lead to various social pressures, self-perceptions, and even influence how they're perceived and treated by adults. It really emphasizes that while we have these stages and age ranges, the lived experience of adolescence is highly individualized. It's profoundly affected by these developmental disparities.
Okay, let's zoom in a bit on the physical changes because the source, Adolescence Transition to Adulthood, really highlights puberty as a major milestone. And here's where it gets really interesting, the specific biological shifts that signal this transition. It's almost like a biological clock suddenly hitting a new phase, fundamentally altering the body.
Puberty is precisely that. It's a major developmental milestone, signaling an adolescent's transition from childhood to adulthood. The source describes it as the productive changes that occur during adolescence, focusing on the body's maturation towards reproductive capability. And it's crucial, I think, to understand the distinction the source makes between primary and secondary sexual characteristics.
Okay.
Primary characteristics are the physical features directly involved in reproduction itself. So for females, this includes the ovaries, uterus, and vagina. For males, it's the penis, scrotum, and testicles. These are the core reproductive organs themselves, basically becoming functional.
And the secondary characteristics, those are the more visible outward signs that most people think of, right? The ones you can actually see happening.
Exactly. Secondary characteristics refer to the external, additional signs of sexual maturity. For example, breast development in females is a key secondary characteristic, often one of the first visible signs, actually.
Right.
The growth of pubic hair for both sexes is another common secondary characteristic. Similarly, the deepening of the voice in boys or the widening of hips in girls, those are all secondary characteristics.
Yeah.
Understanding this distinction helps us appreciate the foundational internal reproductive changes versus the broader bodily manifestations of puberty, the ones that are outwardly noticeable and often contribute to changes in body image and self-perception.
The document then dives into the specific sequences of these changes, and it's quite detailed. For girls, there's a progression that typically starts with l'Arche, or the budding of breasts.
Yes, l'Arche.
Which usually occurs between 9 and 13 years. That can be a very early and sometimes, I imagine, surprising sign for young girls.
It often is, yes.
Then pubarche, which is pubic hair growth, generally happens between 9 and 14 years. These are often followed by a significant growth spurt, sometimes making them feel like their limbs are suddenly too long for their bodies. We've all been there.
Yes, that awkward phase.
And finally, menarche, the first menstrual period, usually occurs between 10 and 15 years. So many distinct markers for girls, happening over several years, marking significant, life-altering stages in their development.
Yes, and each of these markers signifies the body's systematic preparation for reproductive capability. It's quite remarkable. Larch is the initial hormonal shift indicating breast development, a sign of estrogen at work. Pubarch signifies the onset of androgen production that leads to pubic hair, and later, armpit hair. The growth spurt is that rapid increase in height and weight, driven by growth hormones and sex hormones, which can be quite traumatic in a short period.
Yeah.
And menarche is the final signal that the reproductive system is functional, marking the beginning of fertility. It's a complex, coordinated biological dance, really, where each step prepares the body for its adult functions. Imagine a young girl, perhaps just 9 or 10, noticing these subtle but profound changes in her body. It's not just a biological event, it's a huge psychological shift as her body signals entry into a new phase of life, potentially before she's emotionally ready for it.
And for boys, a similar progression, but with its own unique sequence, right? The source tells us it typically begins with early testicular growth, often a very private change, but the first indicator.
That's generally considered the first clinical sign, yes, driven by testosterone.
Okay. This is followed by pubarch, or pubic hair growth.
Correct.
Then further testicular growth and penile growth occur. And a quite common, but maybe less talked about, physiological change for boys are nocturnal emissions, commonly known as wet dreams, which mark the onset of sperm production.
Yes, that's a key indicator of the maturation of the male reproductive system.
They also experience a distinct growth spurt, just like girls, but often a bit later and maybe more intensely.
Typically, yes. Later than girls, which can sometimes lead to that period where girls temporarily outgrow boys their age.
Right. And then, of course, the voice change that's often so noticeable. A deepening that can be quite dramatic, sometimes with cracking or instability before settling into a lower tone.
Indeed. That's caused by the lengthening and thickening of the vocal cords due to hormonal influence, a very prominent secondary sexual characteristic. And it can certainly be an awkward period for boys as their voice fluctuates unpredictably.
What about the underlying mechanics of all this? The source suggests there's a biological trigger happening well before things become outwardly apparent. So it's not like these changes just, poof, appear overnight.
That's absolutely right. It's fascinating, actually. The sophisticated mechanisms that control pubertal change actually develop prenatally. They set the stage for what's to come years later.
Wow, prenatally.
Yes. And the pubertal hormones responsible for these profound changes, like estrogen and testosterone, they begin to increase around the age of 7 years. So while we see the visible, dramatic signs of puberty in the adolescent years, the biological groundwork is laid much, much earlier, quietly preparing the system. And one of the most interesting physical realities the document highlights is that these somatic or bodily changes don't come on smoothly or proportionally. Adolescents often experience significant awkwardness and clumsiness.
That perfectly explains why sometimes they look like they're trying to figure out their own limbs. I distinctly remember feeling like my body was a bit of a foreign object, especially during growth spurts. Suddenly, my feet seemed enormous, and I'd trip over nothing.
Precisely. The source specifically mentions that the feet usually grow faster than the arms and legs. This creates this disproportionate growth that can indeed lead to that feeling of clumsiness, or even looking a bit like, well, a cartoon character with oversized extremities for a while. This can significantly impact their coordination and agility. And this raises an important question, I think. How does this physical awkwardness, driven by uneven growth and the body's rapid reorganization, contribute to the emotional and social challenges adolescents face? It's not just about the changes themselves, but profoundly about how they are experienced.
Right.
Imagine feeling physically out of control of your own body, tripping over your own feet in front of peers, while simultaneously navigating intense social scrutiny and emotional upheaval. It just adds another profound layer of complexity to an already challenging self-conscious period. It's a fundamental source of insecurity for many teenagers.
So it's not just the external look, but that internal feeling of disconnect between their brain and their suddenly unfamiliar body. That leads us beautifully into the next big area, the emotional roller coaster and the shifting social landscape of adolescence. The source defines emotions pretty straightforwardly as strong feelings, things like fear, joy, love, excitement, and behaviors as actions contributing to how one conducts themselves, including attitudes and manners.
Yes, but what's particularly striking here is the profound interconnectedness the source points out. It clearly states that the psychological and physical changes adolescents undergo, coupled with society's expectations and their specific environment, all of this creates high demands that weigh heavily on their emotions.
Okay.
And in reaction to these intense demands and changes, their behaviors end up being altered too. This means that an adolescent's developing mental capacity, their evolving emotions, changing attitudes, shifting interpersonal relationships, emerging sexual feelings, that strong crave for independence, the vital search for self-identity, and the shaping of gender roles. They're all profoundly impacted simultaneously.
Wow.
It's a complete overhaul of the self, really, influenced by a dynamic interplay of internal biological shifts and external pressures from family, peers, and society at large.
That interconnection makes so much sense. It explains why the adolescent moodiness, as the source describes it, can be so unpredictable. Their moods swing wildly from time to time, sometimes within minutes, right? And you might see girls become particularly touchy or irritable, while boys can become maybe more aggressive or overexcited and prone to outbursts.
Yeah, and for a long time, these intense, swinging moods were largely attributed purely to the higher levels of hormones being secreted at that stage. You know, the classic, it's just hormones.
Right, that's the stereotype.
Exactly. And while hormones certainly play a significant role, the source clarifies that researchers now suggest situational factors act in concert with hormonal influence to profoundly affect teenagers' moods. So it's not just hormones made me do it in isolation. It's a complex mix of internal biology interacting with external life experiences and pressures.
That's a crucial nuance. So what are some of those common situational factors that really amplify these mood swings? We're talking school pressure, social dynamics, family friction. And knowing that, what's a key takeaway for how parents or educators can approach these moments beyond just writing it off as teen angst?
Excellent question. The source implies these situational factors are varied and often interconnected, just as you suggested. Think about the intense academic pressures they face, the complex social hierarchies and dramas within peer groups,
Oh, yeah.
shifting family dynamics as they push for independence, and even broader societal expectations about their future. All of these external stressors interact with the hormonal shifts. For example, a minor social slight at school, when combined with surging hormones and a developing brain, can feel like the absolute end of the world, leading to an exaggerated emotional reaction.
Right, I can see that.
So the key takeaway, then, is really to avoid dismissing these mood swings solely as hormonal. Instead, it encourages a more empathetic and, frankly, inquisitive approach. Try to understand the full context of what might be triggering or amplifying the emotion. Providing a safe space for them to express these feelings, validating their experience even if it seems overblown to us, and helping them develop coping mechanisms for stress and disappointment can be far more effective than just telling them to calm down. Or it's just your hormones.
Okay, that's really helpful. And alongside those mood shifts, the source identifies a powerful crave for independence. This is something many parents can relate to, perhaps painfully. Adolescents feel a strong, almost visceral need for freedom and self-direction. Being subjected to orders, rules, constant parental oversight, it becomes burdensome, often feeling like an infringement on their burgeoning autonomy.
This need for independence is incredibly significant. And as the source notes, it actually contributes directly to the very swinging moods we just discussed.
Okay.
It's tied to a new reasoning power that develops at this stage, particularly in middle adolescence. This is where a child begins to think abstractly, critically, and independently. They truly learn to make their own decisions, or at least want to. This rapidly developing cognitive capacity creates a natural and often challenging tension between adults and teenagers. The adolescents demand to be treated as adults, asserting their newfound intellectual capabilities, yet their behaviors are often quite the contrary, impulsive, emotional, sometimes lacking foresight.
Right.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, this craving for independence is a crucial, necessary step in identity formation. It's about testing boundaries, defining their own space, and learning self-governance, however clumsily or defiantly it might be expressed sometimes.
The classic I know everything phase.
But hearing that the source attributes it partly to developing cognitive capacity, that's a key insight. It's not just a rebellious phase. So how does this craving for independence manifest in their daily lives and interactions then? Well, it's expressed through various behaviors that can certainly be challenging for parents and educators. The source highlights things like disobedience, arrogance, and what it calls insensitive pretense. Maybe a display of an I don't care character, even when deep down, they probably do care quite a lot. They can also exhibit intolerance towards adult viewpoints and find it incredibly hard to compromise, digging their heels in on issues that might seem relatively minor to adults. It's a challenging period for both adolescents and the adults around them, definitely. As the developing intellect clashes with the still maturing emotional and behavioral regulation system, they're essentially trying on different identities and testing limits, and yeah, that can look like outright rebellion sometimes.
And hand in hand with that crave for independence often comes what the source terms psychological distancing. This is where the peer group often becomes the new compass, kind of overshadowing family influence, isn't it?
Precisely. The adolescent will increasingly feel more attracted to peers than adults or family members. That's a very common shift. This is a crucial stage when children need a redefinition of relationships, moving from primary dependence on family to forming their own social networks. They begin to develop a personal sense of morality and values, often separate from their parents' inherited beliefs. And they start making lasting, more intimate friendships that are built on shared experiences and mutual understanding.
Okay.
These peer relationships become incredibly significant, often serving as a primary source of validation and identity. But what's fascinating here is the dual nature of this psychological distancing. It's absolutely essential for individuation, for forming one's own identity, for becoming an autonomous person.
Right, it's necessary.
But it also presents a significant challenge for family dynamics. It's a real tightrope walk for both sides, where parents must learn to let go while still remaining a steady presence.
So this distancing also opens the door to a lot of exploration and experimentation, which the source details quite broadly. It's not just about identity, but about trying out different ways of being in the world.
Yes, absolutely. During this stage, adolescents venture into many experiments as they test boundaries and try to find where they fit in. The source lists quite a range: sexual intercourse, drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, different types of dressing, hairstyles, music, computers, you name it.
Yeah, a big range.
Their attitudes and opinions change frequently, sometimes seemingly overnight, reflecting their attempts to figure out who they are and what they believe. They begin to critically question the ideas and values of their family, often holding friends up as their yardsticks, comparing and contrasting their own family's norms with those of their peers. This natural process of questioning and experimentation, while vital for healthy growth and identity formation, inevitably brings temporary conflicts between children and parents. The document emphasizes that both parents and children often display both affection and conflict towards each other, which is a normal, even necessary part of this relational redefinition.
Okay, so conflict isn't necessarily bad.
Not necessarily, no.
Yeah.
But it also warns that if this stage is badly handled, if the conflicts become too severe, or if communication completely breaks down, it can unfortunately lead to family breakage. So the stakes are quite high in how these shifts are navigated by both sides.
Okay, moving from emotions and social interactions more to the inner world, the source delves into the profound cognitive shifts that define adolescence, starting with something called adolescent egocentrism. It's almost like you said before, like they're the main character in their own movie and everyone else is just an extra or part of the scenery.
That's a very apt analogy, yes. The core concept is that the intense physical, emotional, and social changes teenagers undergo force them to deal primarily with themselves instead of focusing on the worldview of others. They develop a heightened sense of self-consciousness, which the source notes tends to peak around 15, 16 years old, almost as if they believe they are constantly under a spotlight.
Right.
They become intensely preoccupied with their own world, their own feelings, their own appearance, their own experiences, and often don't pay sufficient attention to the needs or perspectives of others around them. But this raises an important question. How does adolescent egocentrism, while appearing self-centered or even selfish on the surface, actually serve as a necessary developmental phase? A phase for them to construct a distinct sense of self and identity. It's part of figuring out who they are, independent of their family structure.
And this egocentrism leads to some interesting perceptual errors, according to the source, almost like a distortion of reality for them.
Indeed. Because they're so internally focused, they don't always differentiate between what is important to them and what is important to others. They often assume that others share their thoughts and preoccupations, or that others are as invested in their internal world as they are.
Okay.
They may also fail to distinguish between what is unique to them and what is universal in human experience, like thinking no one has ever felt this way before.
Oh, yes.
The document also points out that this is often the time of onset for the search for identity, that deep questioning of who am I and where do I fit in?
Oh.
In terms of expression, adolescent egocentrism can lead to behaviors that sometimes appear selfish, especially the source notes, in girls. and jealousy, which is common to both sexes, as well as other irrational exhibitions, as the source puts it, like impulsive acts, such as maybe stealing or grabbing something without thinking. It's important to try to understand these aren't necessarily malicious acts, but rather often stem from that intense, sometimes tunnel-visioned internal focus, where their desires or needs temporarily overwhelm their consideration for others.
Okay. And building on that, the source also introduces the concept of the imaginary audience. This really speaks to that intense self-awareness, maybe bordering on paranoia, that they experience. Every move, every hair out of place feels magnified under this imagined scrutiny.
Yes, the imaginary audience describes how adolescents, due to their heightened self-consciousness, tend to overestimate how much they are being observed and judged by others. They truly believe they are usually the target of others' attention and criticism, that everyone is noticing their every perceived flaw or misstep.
Wow, that sounds exhausting.
It is. This leads them to become acutely embarrassed over minor blunders that anyone else would hardly notice because they are convinced everyone has noticed and is judging them negatively. This concept helps account for their sometimes extreme norms of dressing, hairstyles, walking styles, talking styles, and so forth, as they try desperately to conform to perceived expectations or stand out in a way they think will be admired.
Or the opposite.
Or the opposite, exactly. It can also lead them to behave in a very withdrawn way for fear of being seen or making a blunder, choosing instead to fade into the background. The source notes that this phenomenon varies depending on environmental and cultural factors, suggesting that social context plays a significant role in how pronounced this self-consciousness actually is. But yes, it's an exhausting way to live, constantly feeling watched.
And then there's the personal fable, which sounds almost like a superhero origin story, but just in their own minds. This is where we might see them doing something truly wild, believing that won't happen to me because I'm different, I'm special.
The personal fable is a fascinating cognitive distortion, isn't it? It's where adolescents feel profoundly special, unique, and even eternal or invincible. Now, this belief contributes to a vital sense of personal strength, courage, and comfort. It allows them to take on new challenges and explore their identities, which is good.
Right, there's an upside.
There is. However, it also unfortunately contributes directly to high-risk-taking behaviors and a dangerous lack of safety precautions. They genuinely believe their uniqueness will magically protect them from negative outcomes that affect normal people.
So that's why they might do risky things.
Exactly. This means they might disregard seatbelts, experiment with substances, engage in reckless driving, or participate in unprotected sex, believing that consequences simply won't apply to them. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the personal fable, while leading to risky behavior, also underpins a vital sense of agency and optimism. That belief in their own uniqueness and resilience can be crucial for navigating a world and pursuing their goals. But it absolutely needs to be balanced with an understanding of real-world consequences and the importance of safety. It's a very fine line between a healthy sense of self and outright feelings of invincibility. And finding a way for adults to bridge this gap without crushing their spirit is a key challenge during this time.
Okay. So as adolescents navigate all these profound internal and external shifts, the source highlights one of the most significant and often most impactful developments, the emergence of powerful sexual emotions and behavior. This is a massive shift, isn't it? Impacting their internal world and external relationships profoundly.
Indeed. During adolescence, and particularly as they transition into later adolescence, typically between 17 and 19 years, sexual attraction becomes very real and directive. It's not just a vague curiosity anymore or an abstract concept from childhood. It becomes a powerful, focused desire for romantic connection and intimacy. They begin to long for specific romantic partners and actively search for boy-girlfriend relationships, moving beyond just casual friendships to deeper, more emotionally invested connections. They wish to spend longer times with these partners, develop a bit of genuine intimacy, and generally become more stable and committed in their sexual and romantic relationships. This often involves navigating complex social codes around dating, expressing affection, and understanding consent, which is a whole other layer. What's fascinating here, I think, is how the development of stable, intimate relationships often coincides with a growing sense of personal insight and a desire for true autonomy. It reflects a holistic maturation process that encompasses their emotional, social, and physical selves all at once.
This is the stage where that search for deep connection and sometimes a desire for complete independence from family really kicks in, almost simultaneously, it sounds like. That must create immense tension for the adolescent and their family.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
As they become more involved in these intimate relationships, they start to feel more like adults themselves. And sometimes they may even believe they have more insights and experience of the world than the adults around them, including their parents.
Ah, yes. More of the I know better, perhaps.
Perhaps. This newfound sense of maturity, combined with their strong romantic desires, can fuel an intense desire to separate and leave the family to be on their own. This reflects that ultimate push for independence we discussed earlier, now intensified by their emerging sexual and relational maturity. They're seeking to build their own lives, their own homes, and their own chosen relationships, distinct from the family unit they grew up in.
Yeah.
It's a complex blend of wanting intense closeness with peers and romantic partners, while simultaneously seeking distance and full autonomy from parental authority. This period requires a delicate balance of guidance, trust, and communication from both sides to ensure a healthy transition towards adulthood.
So what does all this mean then? We've covered so much ground. We've seen how adolescence is truly a period of monumental transformation, far beyond just physical growth. It's a gradual, multifaceted process that unfolds at different speeds for different individuals, but as you said, follows recognizable patterns across physical, physiological, emotional, sexual, and cognitive domains. From the awkwardness of a growth spurt to the intensity of an imaginary audience and the profound shift from family to peer-centric relationships, it's a time of immense challenge, but also incredible opportunity for growth and self-discovery. It really is a journey of becoming, isn't it? Messy and beautiful all at once.
It really is. And this deep dive truly highlights how much is genuinely in flux for an adolescent. So, given the intense internal changes they're navigating, the surging hormones, the rapidly developing brain, that constant search for identity, coupled with the powerful external influences of peers, societal expectations, digital environments these days, it leads to the final big question, doesn't it? How can we, as adults, best support adolescents in navigating this period? It's not just about them surviving it, but truly thriving, developing resilience, and building a strong, authentic foundation for their adulthood. Understanding these patterns and the underlying mechanisms, as our source material so clearly lays out, is undoubtedly the first critical step towards offering that support effectively.
That's a powerful question for all of us to ponder, isn't it? Whether we're looking back at our own journey through those formative years or maybe looking forward to guiding the next generation. What stood out most to you in our deep dive today?